All right. So since TFM has taught me so much throughout the years, I wanted to cut a video and maybe introduce something to him. This is a new way of thinking. This is a different way of looking at the world, but I've done some research and I've done some math, and all of it kind of checks out. I wanted to stand here and first show you a clip of a guy named Peter Zeihan. All right, he wrote a few books. In particular, recently wrote what's known as Disunited Nations. But before that, he wrote a book called America, the Accidental Superpower. And it's a great book. If you have an opportunity, legit, I'd love to, stand here and give you the opportunity to read it if you are very interested. And with this video, understand that this is nothing more than an open dialogue with my brother. And I wanted to have an opportunity to be able to share this with him. So the basic thesis is this. The United States has a world order, all right? And the world order is not an empire like many think, as me and TFM both know. And this empire that everybody says we have, this world order that we have, where we stand here and protect the entire world's trade routes, and where we stand here and allow everybody to do business wherever they want and bring home, manufactured goods from any country in the world, is about to be over, because it was something that was invented back in the 1940s after World War II. It was what's known as the Bretton Woods Agreement. Now, the Bretton Woods Agreement had two parts. First was the part that we said we would maintain our dollar at $37 an ounce, redeemable by large countries and large banking institutions, not by the general public. And on top of that, we said that we would secure everybody's world trade, and they would have access to the United States market, which was the largest market in the world at the time that had been untouched by World War II and World War I. Now, with this, we also said, look, at this point, we want to be able to fight the Soviets the way we want to be able to fight them and surround them and have the trade, negotiations the way we want to have them. And the world agreed, right? Because they said, well, at this point, we all have empires that we can't maintain because nobody had a navy. And the United States Navy was really basically the only one floating after World War II. So we stood here and bribed ourselves up an alliance. And this alliance allowed us to stand here and, have free trade all over the world, and allowed the world to be able to do so. We even offered it to Japan. We offered it to Germany, all right, after World War II. After all the fighting and the nonsense and the garbage, even during Vietnam, we defended Vietnam's trade routes. Well, this world order is coming to an end. I'll let Mr. Zeihan explain it for me.
Joining me today on the conference live stage is Peter Zeihan. Peter is somebody I've followed for years and years, and I've been a fan of his writing for some time. It's quite a treat. He is, if you don't know, the president and founder of Zeihan on Geo-Politics, and previously he was the vice president of analysis at Stratfor, which is where I discovered your work. Peter, for my first question, why should financial professionals care about geopolitics?
Well, the primary reason is that the model that we've all used, the idea that rule of law is the norm, that financial transfers can happen frictionlessly, that's going away. We're going back to an older way of global operations, and in that sort of environment, being aware of geopolitical risk is really the only way to avoid catastrophic loss. We're entering a period of disorder where everything that we think we know is breaking.
Yeah. In fact, I know that part of your plenary session tomorrow is going to be about that global breakdown. What are the major parts of that thesis, if you would?
Well, the big piece that most people forget is we didn't get to this global order by accident. This is decades of deliberate effort by the United States in order to build up an alliance, subsidized alliance, to fight the Cold War. Well, the Cold War ended 30 years ago, so the Americans have been backing away bit by bit. Donald Trump is more of a feature than a bug.
Now, the moment was literally made for Donald Trump. And in a way, I don't think a lot of people really understand, because this is much bigger than just America. This is the entire world. And this is something that Donald Trump's been speaking about for a long time. Here, look.
You took out a full-page ad in major U.S. newspapers last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
What do you think of...
Now, understand, this isn't an advertisement or some politicizing for Trump. This isn't me stumping for him or anything of this nature, all right? Because there's plenty of things that I think Trump is terrible on, like legit. But on the same point, on the very, very big picture, on the very big items, the macro ideologies, I'm kind of completely looking and going, man, listen, there has never been somebody who has been this consistent about standing here and stating his point and getting things exactly right and being there at the exact moment it needs to be done. It's very strange, and it's something that I think we all need to pay attention to. Let's listen to some more about Zihan, about what's going on.
And whoever won the American presidency back in 2016 was going to rule over the end of the order structure.
Right.
Now Trump is doing it with a little bit more glee than is perhaps entirely appropriate, but we're kind of getting to the same place.
Right. So let me ask you a question. You mentioned World War II. Some people said we were in a post-World War II era. We were in the 9/11 era. It sounds like you're saying there's a new era. Do you have a good name for that? What's your leading candidate?
The disorder.
The disorder. Oh, okay. All right. And the elements of that are the dismantling of basically the post-World War II, post-9/11 era. What are the features of this new order besides disorder?
It's going to be chaos. In the world before World War II, everything was imperial. So you had imperial centers in London and Paris and Tokyo and other places that had their own spheres of influence where they would kind of imprint a certain mode of operation. There were certain boundaries on what you could and couldn't do. After 70 years of the Americans being in charge of almost everything, most countries have forgotten how to do that. So it's going to take 2-3 decades for everyone to kind of get their feet back under them. And in the meantime, countries that have based themselves around free market economics and global trade and easily accessible finance, they're the ones who are going to be going through the greatest disruptive processes.
Right.
So we have to have a considerable cascade of failures before anyone can rise from the ashes. That's going to take 20 years.
So, and I know as a part of your thesis and part of what you're talking about right now is you believe that there's something right around the corner that's worse than the global financial crisis. What is it? What are the elements of it? Why do you say this?
Well, something that most folks forget is in the world before 45, most markets went to zero. When we're talking about things like a Russian collapse or a Chinese collapse, we're talking about markets that we know are broken in the normal way of doing things, and yet money still flows in. So when you remove the veneer of respectability and the veneer of international stability, and all of a sudden countries have to trade on their own merits. So the idea that any of these locations can be financial destinations evaporates pretty quickly. If anything, they're going to be sources of absolutely monumental capital flight. In China, conservatively in the last 7 years, we've had $3 trillion flow out already. So the Chinese are already voting with their checkbooks. It's just a question of how long it is until the people in the Western world, who oftentimes manage the flow of money both ways, registers that. And when that happens, you're talking about a financial catastrophe that is unprecedented in the modern world.
So to tease that out and to summarize, you're saying your thesis is global capital flows are basically based on reputation, right? And you think
only a slight over exaggeration, yes.
Slight over exaggeration, and that the markets are broken, but money flows there anyway. Have you identified as a part of your work some possible catalysts? I know I don't want you to put all your chips on one. What are the catalysts that you're looking for?
Let me just kind of give you 4 quick ones. Number one, we know that as the Chinese system is facing greater financial and economic problems, one child means that consumption-led growth, for example, is impossible. They're going to become more bellicose in an attempt to rewrite the region.
Yeah.
If the Americans aren't involved, that means the Japanese have to do something. And if there's one country that we know in world history knows how to fight a naval war, it's Japan.
Yeah.
Number 2, the Russians are dying out as a people. They're going to be moving west. Ukraine is just step 1, and Europe is not ready. But when Europe starts to get ready, the country that matters is Germany. So we're looking forward to the rearming of the German system. That should make us all a little nervous. Number 3, without the Americans in the Persian Gulf, the Saudis are taking matters into their own hands. Syria is an example of what that looks like. So we can look at a broad Middle Eastern battle royal. But perhaps the most problematic is the United States.
Sure.
Because here's the country that is guaranteed everything. Here's the country that has a navy more powerful than everyone else is put together by a factor of 10. And all of a sudden it has no stake in the system. So its military is now withdrawn. The U.S. is at its lowest deployment level since the 20s. And it's already had 3 years to rest, recoup, rearm, and any country that is dumb enough to poke the United States right now kind of deserves what they're getting.
Yeah.
But the U.S. is now entering a system where it sees disruption as better for its interests than order. And we're just not ready to process that.
So let's take half a step back, right? So that's...
Okay, so I've been trying to explain this to Karoy and TFM server and basically everybody. I got a lot of people who really understand exactly what I'm saying, and I've actually, handed out copies of this book, an audio book actually, to a few people, and they completely grasp and understand concept. So I guess what I'm saying is this: there's a much bigger picture than just the U.S. national picture, right? The domestic ideologies of Antifa and burning things down and all these riots and BLM and all the shit that goes with it. There's a reason why open border societies, guys like George Soros, are funding these things. It's not because he likes to be charitable to black people or charitable to underprivileged societies or whatever the case might be. It's really more along the lines of the U.S. market and the U.S. domestic ideology, the U.S. domestic policies and the U.S. domestic disruptions are put there to stop the international order from being disrupted, right? So the rioters are there to tear down things, to get individuals to stand here and go, oh man, this is, something that we should be protecting, and, to rally the young people on their sides and things of this nature. And the reasons why that's important to understand is because once you have companies like Nike or companies like Apple or companies like any of these large corporations that manufacture massive amount of products overseas, once their supply lines start getting disrupted and they're not ready for it, they don't have the domestic base, they don't have the domestic manufacturing capability anymore, they're going to lose everything. And so therefore, they're going to do everything in their power to try and stop any politician who's going to disrupt this order and who's going to stop them from being able to ship their goods around. Now, this may sound like a positive thing to somebody who's a free market global ideology, right? Who's somebody all about free trade. But the truth of the matter is most of this really isn't free trade, all right? I can understand, countries that are dirt poor, Thailand or Bangladesh, places of this nature that don't have a lot of capital resources, individuals who are extremely poor, people who live in huts. I can understand, look, we're not going to sell a lot of stuff in their markets, but we are selling iPhones and, whatever the case might be. But what we're not doing is we're not selling goods in Japan. We're not selling a lot of goods in China, though they sell their manufacturing goods over here. So it's important to understand that this trade is actually pretty one-sided when things come down to it. And that's the reason why there's this trade deficit. And Donald Trump understands this. There's tariffs all over Europe. There's tariffs in the Middle East. There's a lot of places where it's not free market both ways. It's only free market this way. And the movement of people also is going to be disrupted. We're not just going to start letting everybody in here again. I know that everybody thinks, and there's a lot of smart people out there. Even this guy Zion, he actually states in one of his speeches that he believes that standing here bringing the smartest individuals in is a good thing for this country. But he said we're not winning this war. Like, we're not winning this ideology, because there's engineers here who are out of work. And so with that being said, there's going to be a very isolationist ideology. And the truth is that only 12% of our GDP is tied up in exports. So the truth is legit. And actually half of that is Canada and Mexico. And the vast majority of it's Mexico, because Canada is actually becoming a liability as far as things are really concerned, because they can't really consume any goods because their population is aging very, very quickly because they didn't have any kids. The United States isn't in such bad shape. That's only because we have a lot of Mexicans, and actually poor whites are having a lot of kids, believe it or not. Poor white women are actually having 2.4 kids per woman. It's, the rich white women inside of the cities that are not having any children, and actually that's mostly all liberals, which is, a bit of an issue when we have 65% of our females, actually going to college and things of this nature. So we all had kind of the same mentality as far as all these things are concerned. But guess what I'm saying is that when you only have 12% or really 6% of your GDP is tied up in global trade, why are you spending $1 trillion a year of tax money to continue to promote this system? When your GDP is $20 trillion, right? Why would you spend $1 trillion of it, which is a fifth, to produce a 6%? That doesn't make. Why would you spend 5% to make 6%? Why that doesn't make any sense in any way, shape, or form. So that's kind of where things really are, as far as finances are really concerned.
A political military sort of a story. At the economic level, is it your belief that at the economic level, part of the geopolitical rumblings, the bellicose Chinese, the westward reaching Russians, are they scheming and plotting to get rid of the petrodollar? I mean, I see rumblings of that, and it looks like there's some machinations to remove that. And if so, what's that world look like?
There's lots of countries that, for whatever reason, are disappointed or dismayed with the role that the U.S. dollar has in the global system. But until there is a competitor to that,
sure, it's
really not going to go anywhere. So in the case of the Russians, everybody in Russia assumes that it's just going to be the ruble, which of course no one wants. The Chinese threw out the idea of it being the yuan for a while, and when they started to loosen their capital controls, $1 trillion fled in less than a year.
Right.
And they slammed those right back on, so they know it's not them.
Right, sure.
The European Union, the euro, that was a possibility until they started confiscating insured bank deposits.
Right.
And so everyone who could move their monies out of euro did. The next country down is Britain.
Yeah.
And no offense against the Brits, but if there's one thing that the rest of the planet agrees on, it's that the pound should never be in charge of anything again.
So the Brexit, or not the Brexit, but the petrodollar is here to stay, is what you're saying.
Yes, for the foreseeable future.
All right.
So the U.S. dollar is not going to be dumped internationally, all right? Because the chip system's in place. The United States dollar has enough liquidity to be able to be used internationally for almost all transactions. This is the reason why they had that problem in the overnight markets last year. But basically the chip system allows us, which is a clearinghouse nonsense, whatever. United States dollar is usually used if you transfer anything between two separate countries, because individuals don't want their own, they don't want other people's currencies, right? For instance, if you live in Turkey, nobody in Turkey wants the Venezuelan Bolivar, right? And if you live in, Venezuela, you don't want any, lira. So the truth is that internationally, all these markets are still going to use dollars for the foreseeable future. And so that's still going to be there. but we're just not going to enforce, trade routes and, stand here and float a military and have thousands of overseas military bases for no other reason other than the fact to be able to project power long term over the vast majority of space. We're going to change the way we do things. So this is a video specifically for TFM and, Karoi, and, whatever. But if you would like to make a response, it'd be cool. I would more than love to hear, a back and forth and have a conversation about this. I think it'd be pretty cool. So in the meantime, this is Tom Pease with Pnoid News. Y'all know the deals. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.